Today we're going to be reviewing the PolarPro Variable ND Filter, the Peter McKinnon edition. It's time. What's up everybody? My name is Rolando and welcome back to another episode on the channel. So we should probably start by first describing what an ND filter is and what it does. So an ND filter, also known as a neutral density filter, takes the amount of light that you have and it cuts it down by a certain number of stops. You can think of a neutral density filter or ND filter as sunglasses for your sensor. Now the ND filter that I have right now is rated from 2 to 5 stops, but PolarPro also has another variable ND filter, also the Peter McKinnon edition, that goes from 6 to 9 stops. Now ND filter is a must-have for video shooters, especially if you shoot in broad daylight and you want to maintain that 180-degree shutter rule. Now the 180-degree shutter rule is double that of your frame rate. So if you're shooting in 24 frames per second, your shutter speed needs to be at least 48 or 50, which most cameras have. So the reason for that is to maintain proper motion blur. So for instance, I know I see a lot of people on YouTube doing this and shaking their hands right now. So if I move my hands like this, you can see some great motion blur. Now, as you increase your shutter speed, you will increase a choppy effect because you're capturing more frames per second and you lose some of that cinematic feel that you accomplish with the 180-degree shutter rule. Now, ND filter comes in two types of varieties and they both comes with their pros and cons. You have a fixed ND filter, which is basically one solid piece of glass that is rated at 2, 3, 4, 5 stops all the way up to 10 or 10 plus. Now that's the highest quality of ND filter as you can get. As you all know, the more glass you put in front of your camera sensor, it actually starts to diminish your image. Now the downside of that is every time you need to change the ND filter or change the exposure or change the stops, you have to unscrew the ND filter and put it on a different stop. Now the advantages of a variable ND filter is you put on one filter and you can go from 2 to 5. A variable ND filter is comprised of two types of polarizer that twist upon each other. And the disadvantage of that is as you start to increase the range of the variable ND filter, you start to get this ugly X pattern across your image and you start to introduce some of this vignetting. Now, if you look at one of my earlier videos, the one where I was in the Dominican Republic, you can see that I start to get this weird vignetting when I'm using my 16 to 35. So the wider the lens is, the more you start to see that ugly vignetting pattern. And it also start to introduce some weird purplish, greenish, tealish color shift on the edges. Now, PolarPro states that you won't have as much of that. Well, they say you eliminate it, but you definitely won't have as much of that all the way down to 16 millimeters. So today, we're gonna put that to the test. And we're also gonna test this variable ND filter for video work, and we're also gonna test it for photography and stills as well, to see by adding 2 more pieces of glass in front of your sensor, how much more does that affect your image quality. Now I've had this package for over a week now. I've been really excited to get outside and test this out, but the weather outside is not cooperating with me. So if my outfit changes between now and when I hop outside to do the test, that's the reason why. So hopefully the weather will work with me and it will stop raining so I can go outside and get some footage for you guys. But before we go outside, let's just talk about how great this packaging is from PolarPro. When you spend $250 plus on a variable ND filter or ND filter or any product for that matter, this is the kind of packaging that you hope you will be able to receive. I am beyond pleased and impressed by the packaging on this. I mean, from the front to the back, everything looks good. And when you actually open up the package, you're greeted by this beautiful picture of Moraine Lake in Alberta, Canada, that Peter McKinnon himself had taken. Now, when you open up and dive deep into the package, you're greeted on the left side by a hard carrying case. As you can see, the filter goes into. On the right side, there's a little foam insert that's blanked off right now. As I take it out, I believe that is for if you want to put the filter itself on display. You also get your normal assortment of get started guides and some paperwork that you probably never ever look at, and you'll probably just look at once and toss to the wayside. But this is the cool thing. You actually get a second soft case to carry this thing. I cannot believe PolarPro really outdid itself. And then on top of that, PolarPro gives you this cool cleaning cloth with a picture of Moraine Lake again. Like, they really outdid themselves. This is amazing. This thing belongs in a museum. And then look at that. Look at this. You open this up and you have this nice little filter and the packaging still with the design. I believe this thing belongs in a museum. This is beautiful. I mean, the filter itself will continue to test, obviously, but the packaging is top notch. I've never seen anything like this. Okay, you guys get it. The packaging is beautiful. Let's see how this thing actually performs. First up is the PolarPro ND filter Peter McKinnon edition. Decided to start shooting at 24 millimeter, and you can hardly notice any vignetting. As you move to 20 millimeters, the vignetting starts to creep into the frame a bit, and as you move even wider to 16 millimeter, the vignetting is becoming quite a bit more noticeable. This image is way more than usable, and best of all, you don't have that dreaded X pattern. This is accomplished because PolarPro has made hard stops at each end of the range, which prevents you from overturning the two internal polarizers. Now, the same thing cannot be said about the Tiffin polarizer that I use. Now, if you take a look at it, even at 24 millimeters, you can already see the top right and the bottom left corner, the vignetting that's happening. As you move to 20 millimeters, there's even more vignetting. And when you move to 16 millimeters, there is a ton of vignetting. And it doesn't help that you don't have any hard stops on the Tiffin filter. You can keep turning and turning, and you continue to get this ugly X pattern that continues to go in and out of frame. And if you're not careful, this can completely ruin your shots. So round one was an easy win. But for round two, let's see how much the more expensive Peter McKinnon edition of the PolarPro ND filter fares up against the cheaper Tiffin alternative. So let's zoom in. So on the left side, I have the PolarPro ND filter. And on the right side, I had the Tiffin ND filter. And I just took a shot of the bricks that are right outside my house. The only thing I did was boost the exposure a little bit on each of these so you can see them a little bit better. I didn't even correct for barrel distortion. And yes, I shot raw. So if we zoom in right in the center of the frame, you notice right off the bat, I mean, definitely pixel peeping here. And hopefully you can see this, guys, on YouTube. Hopefully it's not too much compression. But this one on the left is the Peter McKinnon edition. It is so much more detailed, so much more crisp. I shot this at 2.8, I believe. Yes. So I didn't quite get it at 50 millimeters. So it's saying 51 millimeters at ISO 100, 1/25th of a second. This was on a tripod. And I shot this at 2.8. I probably could have shot this at f4 because as you know, this lens gets a little bit sharper over time. I'm shooting with the 24 to 70 G Master. But the point is, when shooting wide open, there is a completely noticeable difference. And I hope you guys can actually see this in the center of the frame. Now, as you go over to the right side of the frame, I can see a little bit difference in this corner. But as you come down to, if I can get back out a little bit, this bottom corner, like this cheaper Tiffin filter is completely, like almost completely out of focus. It's not even good. And the corner sharpener here is usable. And the same thing can be true for this corner over here. If I can zoom in, almost completely unusable. It's just like completely out of focus. And then over here as well, this one is okay. So the two top corners okay. I don't know if my lens is a little bit off center. That could be the case, but funny because I never did this test, so it's kind of teaching me something. Or I could have been off to the side a little bit. So yeah, it's first picture and it's not even close. Definitely the more expensive alternative is a lot better. So let's take a look at another photo that I took. For my second photo, I decided to take a little bit more complex of an image. I have some foliage in the foreground. I have another image over here framing this church up pretty well. And I want to take a picture of this clock. And if you zoom in to pixel peep a little bit, you will notice that the difference is actually not that much difference. A little bit different than what I expect. I will say that the PolarPro is casting a little warm tint to the image, and the Tiffin cheaper Tiffin is casting a cooler image. But all in all, I'd say they both did quite okay. But you can definitely tell if you zoom in that the PolarPro is definitely a little bit more sharp. And then if you come into the bricks here a little bit, once again, it's a little cooler on the cheaper Tiffin and a little bit warmer on the PolarPro, the color shift. But I'd say they're pretty neck and neck here. I can barely tell a little bit of a difference. But you guys might not be able to tell any difference at all. I'm sure if I shot this at a higher f-stop number, that there would be more of a difference. But from here overall, in this image, you can't really tell that much of a difference. I mean, over here a little bit, you can see right here, it's just a little bit more detail here, and it's a little bit less detail over here. Overall, the PolarPro filter is definitely a better bang for your buck. And if you're buying a high quality glass, such as anything as a Sony G Master or Canon L glass or the highest level Nikon can sell, or Fuji for that matter, if you're looking for the best ND filter to put in front of your expensive glass, then I highly recommend the Peter McKinnon edition PolarPro filter. But that's going to be it for today's episode, guys. It took me a while to compile all this information, this data. If you could, please leave a like. Let me know that you are interested in this kind of stuff, and I will continue to invest my time to produce this for you. And yeah, helps the channel out a lot. And every like you leave could help someone else find my channel. So I appreciate you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.